When Keanu Reeves finally confessed, Sandra Bullock's response stunned the world. The evening was still, but inside Keanu Reeves there was a storm that had been growing for years. He stood by the window of his quiet home, staring at the city lights scattered like stars below. For decades he had carried secrets in silence, building walls around his heart so no one could see how much he longed for something real. The world knew him as humble, gentle, always giving without asking for anything in return. But what no one knew was the truth that haunted him every night. He had left words unsaid, words meant for someone who had once been the brightest light in his life, Sandra Bullock. Their story had begun long ago, on sets filled with cameras and voices, laughter echoing between takes, late-night conversations that felt too honest to be scripted. They had built a friendship that outlasted the chaos of fame, a bond the public often speculated about but never truly understood. And yet beneath that friendship lived something deeper, something Keanu had locked away because he was afraid to ruin what they had, afraid to open his heart and find it broken once more. Now, years later, standing by the window, he felt the weight of silence crushing him. He thought about the times he almost told her, the night they walked through the streets after an award ceremony, their hands brushing together, both laughing like kids who had no reason to be guarded. He thought about the times she had looked at him with an expression he could never forget, an expression that seemed to ask a question he was too afraid to answer. But tonight was different. Tonight the fear was outweighed by the regret of waiting too long. His heart told him he could not keep silent anymore. His phone vibrated softly on the table. When he saw her name light up the screen, his chest tightened. He answered, his voice quiet but steady. "Keanu," she said, her tone carrying warmth and surprise. "I didn't think you'd pick up this late." He closed his eyes, letting the sound of her voice settle into the cracks of his heart. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "And maybe it's time I told you something I should have said years ago." A pause followed. He could hear her breathing, the silence between them suddenly alive with tension. "What is it?" she asked gently. Keanu's throat tightened, his words caught between courage and fear. "Sandra, I've carried this for so long. Through every film, every loss, every quiet night, and I don't want to carry it in silence anymore." Her voice softened, almost trembling. "Keanu, what are you trying to say?" He turned from the window, pressing his hand against his chest as if holding his heart steady. "I should have told you years ago, but I think I've always loved you." The words fell into the night like stones into still water, rippling outward, unstoppable. His heart pounded, every second stretched thin by uncertainty. On the other end of the line, Sandra was silent. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. And when she finally spoke, her voice was nothing like what he expected. The silence after his confession stretched longer than Keanu could bear. Every second felt like an eternity. He paced slowly across the room, his hand gripping the edge of the table as if it could steady the storm inside him. He had finally spoken the truth, but now he feared the truth would shatter everything he had cherished with Sandra. Finally, her voice came through the phone, soft but heavy with emotion. "Keanu, do you know what you just did?" He stopped pacing, his chest tight. "I know," he whispered, "and I know I might have ruined everything between us. But I couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed you to know." Sandra exhaled, the sound fragile and trembling. "You think I don't know what it's like to carry something for years? To wonder if the other person feels the same?" Her voice broke for a moment, then steadied. "Do you think you were the only one afraid?" Keanu froze, her words cutting through him like lightning. He had expected rejection, maybe even gentle disappointment. But this was different, Sandra. His voice cracked, disbelief clear. "You weren't the only one who kept quiet," she admitted. "There were nights I wanted to tell you too, but I was afraid it would ruin what we had. I was afraid of losing you." Keanu sank into a chair, his head in his hands. All these years, all the moments they had let slip away because fear had been louder than love. "Why now?" she asked suddenly, her tone curious, almost cautious. "Why after all this time?" He lifted his head, staring into the quiet room. "Because I realize silence is worse than heartbreak. I've lost too much in my life by waiting. I didn't want to lose this too." There was another pause, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, alive, pulsing with something unsaid. "Keanu," Sandra said gently, "you just changed everything." The weight of her words pressed into him, equal parts terrifying and hopeful. He wanted to see her face, to know if her eyes carried the same emotion her voice hinted at. "Can I see you?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated. "Tonight?" Yes, he said firmly, his heart pounding. I need to see you tonight. There was a long pause, then the sound of her quiet laugh mixed with nerves and relief. All right, Keanu. Meet me where it all began. His chest tightened. He knew exactly what she meant. The old diner where they had first shared a late-night meal after filming, where they had laughed until morning. And as he grabbed his keys and headed for the door, Keanu realized the night ahead might not just change their friendship, it could change the rest of their lives. The drive to the diner felt longer than any journey Keanu had ever taken. The streets were quiet, the glow of the streetlights stretching across the pavement, and every passing second his mind replayed the moment he confessed. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his heart pounding. He had said the words he had buried for years, and now he was about to face what they truly meant. The diner came into view, its neon sign flickering in the cool night air. It looked almost the same as it had years ago, when they had stumbled in after long hours on set, both too tired to care about anything but coffee and laughter. He parked outside, his chest heavy with anticipation. Inside, Sandra was already there. She sat at a booth near the back, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. When she looked up and their eyes met, Keanu felt the years between them collapse. She gave him a small, nervous smile, and he walked toward her, every step echoing louder than the last. You came, she said softly as he slid into the seat across from her. I had to, he replied, his voice low, steady, but trembling with emotion. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the silence between them carrying the weight of decades. Then Sandra broke it, her voice almost a whisper. Keanu, do you know how many times I imagined this? You saying those words. Me sitting here wondering if it was real. He swallowed hard. Then why didn't you ever say anything? She lowered her gaze to the table, her fingers tracing the rim of the coffee cup. Because I thought timing mattered. I thought maybe if we waited, the right moment would come. But the truth is, Keanu, there's never been a right moment. Only fear. Her honesty hit him like a wave. He had lived his life believing silence protected what mattered. But here they were, both admitting it had only built walls. I don't want to waste any more time, Keanu said, leaning forward, his voice filled with quiet urgency. Life is too short. I've seen how quickly it can all disappear. I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel. Sandra looked up then, her eyes glistening, her expression torn between relief and fear. You've always been the one constant in my life, Keanu. The one person I trusted completely. But if we cross this line, everything changes. Maybe that's what we need, he said. A change. A chance. She studied him, her breath unsteady. Then almost reluctantly she whispered, Do you know what scares me most? Not losing what we have, but realizing we could have had more all along. His chest tightened. Her words were both a confession and a wound. Before he could answer, the waitress arrived, breaking the moment with a casual smile and a pot of coffee. They both thanked her quietly, but when she walked away, their eyes locked again, stronger this time, heavier. Something unspoken hung between them, a truth too large to ignore anymore. And in that booth, under the dim diner lights, Keanu knew the night was only beginning. The diner was nearly empty now, just the faint hum of the jukebox in the corner, and the clink of dishes being stacked in the kitchen. Keanu and Sandra sat across from each other, the air between them thick with words unsaid. He wanted to reach across the table to take her hand and erase the distance, but fear still lingered. Finally, Sandra broke the silence. Do you remember that night on set when the power went out? She asked, her lips curving into a faint smile. Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah, you lit those candles and we sat on the floor talking until sunrise. I almost told you then, she admitted. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried a storm. I almost said I loved you, but I stopped myself because I didn't want to risk losing you. His breath caught. Sandra, all these years we've been carrying the same fear. She looked down, her fingers trembling as they circled the coffee mug. And what if we're too late now? What if the world has already decided who we are supposed to be? Keanu leaned forward, his voice low, urgent. The world doesn't decide for us. It never has. I've spent my life listening to everyone else, but tonight, I'm listening to my heart, and it's telling me I can't walk away from you. Sandra's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide, but he saw them. The vulnerability in her expression tore at him, but it also gave him hope. Before he could say more, the waitress came back with the bill, leaving it on the table with a polite smile. The ordinary gesture only made the moment feel more surreal. Here they were, two people on the edge of something extraordinary, in the middle of a place so ordinary. Sandra reached for the bill, but Keanu gently placed his hand over hers. The touch was electric, pulling both of them into a silence louder than words. Her hand trembled under his, but she didn't pull away. "Keanu," she whispered, "if we do this, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" He searched her face, every line and shadow familiar yet new. "I don't want to go back," he said softly. "I only want to go forward, with you." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The diner seemed to fade around them, leaving only the two of them in that fragile, suspended space. Finally, Sandra withdrew her hand, not in rejection, but in hesitation. "Then meet me tomorrow," she said. "Not here. Somewhere different. Somewhere that belongs to us." "Where?" he asked, his heart pounding. "You'll know," she replied, a small knowing smile tugging at her lips, and with that, she stood, leaving him in the booth with his heart racing, his mind full of questions and the undeniable truth that the next day would change everything. The next day felt like a lifetime. Keanu barely slept, his mind replaying every word from the diner, every flicker of Sandra's expression. When morning came, he walked through his home aimlessly, waiting for the hours to pass. He knew she had said he would know the place, but uncertainty gnawed at him. What if he chose wrong? What if he misunderstood? By afternoon, he found himself driving without destination, guided only by memory. The city stretched out before him, yet something in his chest pulled him away from the noise, away from the crowd. Then, like a quiet whisper, he remembered. The lake, the one they had once visited during filming, where they had skipped stones and laughed like children. It was their place, untouched by the world. He drove there, heart pounding, and when he arrived, his breath caught. Sandra was already standing by the water, her hair moving with the breeze, her figure calm and still against the shimmering surface. She turned as he approached, and the way her eyes softened told him he had chosen right. "You remembered?" she said quietly. "How could I forget?" he answered, his voice almost breaking. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunlight dance on the water. Then Sandra spoke, her tone steady but fragile. "Keanu, do you understand why I brought you here?" "This place. It was the first time I realized I wanted more than friendship with you, but I buried it because I was afraid of what it could destroy." His chest tightened, emotion rising in waves. "And now?" he asked gently. She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Now I realize what we destroyed by staying silent. All those years we could have had, gone because of fear." Keanu stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until only a breath separated them. "I don't want to waste another year," he said. "Not another day." Her lips trembled, her hands tightening at her sides. "But what if we fail, Keanu? What if this isn't the fairy tale people imagine?" He shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. "It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real, and you are the most real part of my life." For a moment, the air was still, heavy with unspoken truths. Then Sandra's eyes filled with tears that finally fell. "Do you know what your confession did to me?" she whispered. "It broke something open in me I thought was gone. You stunned me because I never thought you'd be brave enough to say it out loud, and now, I don't know how to go back." Keanu reached for her hand, his fingers trembling as they touched. She didn't pull away this time. Instead, she held on, gripping him like she had been waiting her whole life. The world around them blurred, the water, the sky, the years of silence, and in that moment, only one truth mattered. They were no longer afraid. The lake was quiet, its surface glowing under the soft evening light. Keanu and Sandra stood hand in hand, both breathing as if they had just crossed a finish line after years of running. Neither spoke at first because words felt too small for what was unfolding. Finally, Sandra broke the silence. "Keanu, we can't ignore what this means. The world knows us as friends, as co-stars, as people who shared memories but never crossed the line. If this becomes real, it will change everything." He looked at her, his eyes calm but certain. "The world doesn't scare me anymore. Losing you does." Her breath caught. The weight of those words pressed into her heart, making her eyes fill again. For so long she had carried her own fear. Fear of gossip, of broken trust, of losing the one person who had never left her side. But now standing here, she realized that fear had cost them too many years already. Keanu squeezed her hand gently. "I've lived through loneliness, through silence, through nights where I thought I had nothing left. And still, the one thought that always gave me strength was you. Your laugh, your kindness, your way of reminding me that I mattered. I don't want to live another day hiding that truth." Sandra's lips trembled. "Do you really think we can make this work?" He smiled softly, almost sadly, but with unshakable honesty. I don't just think it. I believe it. Because love isn't about guarantees, it's about choosing. And I choose you, Sandra, every time. The confession hung between them like a promise, raw and unbreakable. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she smiled through them, finally letting the walls fall. Then hear my answer, Keanu. I choose you too. I always have. I was just too afraid to say it. The word struck him with the force of everything he had ever longed for. All the nights of silence, all the moments of almost, all the times they had walked away when their hearts wanted to stay. It all came rushing back. But now it no longer hurt. It felt like healing. They stood there closer than ever, the sound of the water lapping gently against the shore, as if the world itself was giving them its blessing. For years, they had been icons, admired from afar, their friendship painted by speculation. But here, away from the cameras, they were simply two souls who had finally found the courage to speak. And as Keanu pulled her into an embrace, holding her like he had always wanted to, he whispered into her hair, "We're not too late. This is our beginning." Sandra closed her eyes, her tears falling against his chest, and for the first time in decades, they both felt free, not just as friends, not just as stars, but as two hearts that had finally chosen to stay. Together, the world would be stunned when they found out. But for Keanu and Sandra, the only thing that mattered was the truth they had finally confessed.